Autumn in Boston is a season of beautiful foliage, but inside the Montgomery mansion, there was always a cold tension. In the spacious dining room, Judith Montgomery sat quietly next to her father Harold. Harold had achieved success as a corporate executive, and his dignity was absolute even within the home. His gaze was fixed on his youngest daughter Vanessa, who was speaking animatedly across the table. Then the Wall Street hedge fund manager was so impressed with my presentation that he signed a contract right away. As Vanessa spoke proudly, Harold's face broke into a wide smile. That's my daughter. Talent comes from bloodline, doesn't it? Martha, their mother, smiled silently as she served the roast chicken, saying, Vanessa always charms everyone around her. It was a quiet word of praise, but for Judith, it had a painful ring. Judith had never heard such words of praise from her father. Her sister Vanessa had been the family's princess since birth. Harold would place her on his knee, give her special gifts, and never missed her school events. Meanwhile, Judith's report cards and artwork rarely received attention. By the way, Judith, is Thomas running late again today? Harold addressed Judith, which was unusual. His tone contained mild reproach about her husband's absence from the family meal. He has final adjustments on a big project today, Judith answered calmly. I think he'll be home around 9. He's truly dedicated to his work, Martha said, but there was a hint of concern behind her words. Lately, Thomas had been coming home increasingly late. Judith and Thomas had met when she joined the Boston marketing group after college graduation. What began as a collegial relationship deepened, and they married 3 years later. Thomas was an intelligent and ambitious man. Judith's calm judgment and his creative ideas formed a perfect complementary relationship in both work and private life. At least until recently. Thomas got promoted, didn't he? To vice president. Vanessa suddenly asked her sister. There was a meaningful gleam in her eyes. Yes, last month, Judith replied. He really worked hard for it, so it's well-deserved. That's wonderful, Vanessa smiled. Actually, I'm thinking about switching to the marketing industry. I'd appreciate your advice. Judith was a bit surprised. Her sister had been steadily building her career in finance. Of course, she answered, hiding her surprise. I'm happy to talk anytime. Actually, I've already consulted with Thomas. He's been very kind in teaching me various things. Judith raised her wine glass and took a sip. She felt an unpleasant sensation spreading in the back of her throat. Thomas hadn't mentioned anything about conversations with her sister. After dinner, Judith helped with the cleanup, said goodbye to her parents, and returned home. Her house with Thomas was in a quiet residential area about a 15-minute drive from her parents' home. When she opened the door, the house was empty and quiet. She sat down on the sofa and took out her cell phone. Just as she was about to send Thomas a message, a notification appeared on the screen. It was a notification of a new email from Thomas's Gmail account. Occasionally, they would access each other's email accounts, especially when they needed to check work-related schedules. Judith couldn't remember why Thomas's emails were set to notify her phone, but the subject line on the screen caught her attention. Today was wonderful. See you tomorrow. V. Judith's fingers paused for a moment. Could a V be Vanessa? She hesitated but opened the email. Thomas, lunch today was very special. When I'm with you, I feel how special I am. I'm sorry for my sister, but our relationship is destiny. I'm looking forward to seeing you again at tomorrow's meeting. I love you. V. Judith's hand trembled, and her cell phone fell onto the sofa. It felt like her world was crumbling with a loud crash. She heard the front door open. Thomas had returned. He entered the living room with a tired expression, but when he saw Judith sitting on the sofa, his expression froze. Seeing his smartphone open on her lap and her cheeks wet with tears, he seemed to understand the situation immediately. Judith. He began, searching for words. How long has it been going on? Judith's voice was surprisingly calm. Thomas slumped his shoulders and sat on the opposite end of the sofa. 3 months, he answered quietly. At first, it was just work consultation. But it's Vanessa, isn't it? My sister, Judith's words were filled with disbelief. She is. Thomas broke off and took a deep breath. Judith, I love her. I want a divorce. Those words echoed heavily in the room. Judith couldn't believe her ears. She never imagined that 10 years of friendship and 5 years of marriage would end like this. And by betrayal with her sister, no less. Get out, Judith said quietly but firmly. My things. Get out now. This time her voice broke. Your lawyer can contact me tomorrow. Thomas tried to say something but fell silent when he saw Judith's expression. He stood up and left the house with only his keys and wallet. Left alone in the room, Judith imagined the long battle that was about to begin. Divorce. Rumors at work. Confrontation with family. And the greatest pain, betrayal from the two people she trusted most. She sank deep into the sofa, trying to gather the pieces of her heart in the darkness of the long night. After the divorce proceedings began, Judith's life changed rapidly. It felt as if the world had turned gray. What she had built over years crumbled overnight. The most painful part was that Thomas and Vanessa had begun dating openly. At the Sunday brunch held at Harold Montgomery's mansion, Judith hesitated to set foot in her father's house for the first time in her life. When she opened the front door, she could hear Vanessa's high-pitched laughter coming from the living room. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked straight into the room. Judith, glad you came, Martha hurried over and embraced her daughter. There was concern in her eyes. In the living room, Harold stood in front of the fireplace, conversing with Thomas. I see, that project is significant. You'll surely make it successful. Thomas was smiling broadly, nodding at Harold's words. When he noticed Judith's presence, his expression hardened slightly, but he quickly composed himself. Hello, Judith. Vanessa didn't stand up from the sofa. She just waved lightly and said, Sister, how are you? Her attitude was insensitive, hardly befitting a sister. Throughout the brunch, Harold eagerly questioned Thomas about work and nodded emphatically at his opinions. A sharp businessman like you is valuable. Vanessa is lucky. Judith continued her meal in silence. Apparently, even after the divorce, her father intended to continue treating his ex-son-in-law as a family member. Harold looked at her only once, merely asking, How's the marketing department doing? There's a departmental reorganization, Judith replied concisely. What she didn't say was that, due to Thomas's influence, she was gradually being excluded from important projects. Vanessa is a winner in life, Harold suddenly said while eating dessert. She always knows how to get what she wants. Martha squeezed Judith's hand under the table. There are various forms of success in life, she said quietly. At the company, the situation worsened. Thomas, as vice president, wielded strong influence and gradually began excluding Judith from client meetings. In her colleagues' eyes, there was a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. Your husband and your sister, that must be tough. When a female colleague approached her in the break room, Judith couldn't take it anymore. She submitted her resignation after 10 years with the company. The HR director showed a regretful expression but said, Considering your situation, this might be the best decision. The marketing industry in Boston was small, and Thomas's connections were extensive. Her job search proved more difficult than expected. Judith, why don't you come over this weekend? Martha called one evening. Your father and Vanessa will be away. When she visited her mother's house, Martha had prepared tea at the kitchen table. It's painful to see your situation, she took her daughter's hand. I'm truly sorry things turned out this way. It's not your fault, Mom. But we allowed that child to be treated specially all the time. Especially your father. Martha took a deep breath. But I didn't come to apologize today. I want to help you. Martha pulled out an envelope. This is part of the inheritance from my family home. It's not a lot of money, but it should be enough for a new beginning. Judith opened the envelope and gasped at the contents. Mom, this much. I can't accept it. Please. You have wonderful talent, but you've always undervalued yourself. This is your chance to start your own business. With Martha's encouragement and financial support, Judith opened a small marketing consultancy firm, Montgomery Strategies. The first few months were tough, but her expertise and integrity gradually built her reputation. 6 months after opening, Judith was giving a lecture at a marketing seminar for startup companies. During the Q&A session, a tall man stood up. Alexander Griffin, CEO of Griffin Technologies. Your analysis is remarkably accurate. I'd like to consult with you about our new product line's marketing strategy. The first meeting with Alex extended from the scheduled 1 hour to 3. He was a genius in the technical field, and Griffin Technologies was a rapidly growing tech company on the East Coast. Their vision and values aligned surprisingly well. We need a marketing expert like you, Alex said. Not just as a consultant, but as a business partner. Over the next few months, Judith and Alex worked closely together and led Griffin Technologies' new product line to success. Her business also grew rapidly, and she began hiring staff. Her relationship with Alex was developing into something beyond work. He respected her opinions and highly valued her expertise. The confidence that had been denied by her family and ex-husband for years gradually returned. Judith, I have important news. One night, they were dining at a restaurant overlooking Boston Harbor. Griffin Technologies has just completed the acquisition of Boston Marketing Group. Judith put down her glass. That was the company where Thomas served as vice president. We needed their creativity and client base. However, a significant reorganization of management is necessary. Alex looked intently into her eyes. I want to bring you on as Chief Strategy Officer. Me? But Thomas is. His position is under re-evaluation, Alex said quietly. We're building a corporate culture that values both talent and character. That night, Alex made another proposal. He took Judith's hand and said, I want to walk through life with you. Not just as business partners, but as life partners. Judith's lips trembled. I still have wounded parts. Let's take our time. There's no need to rush. Just know that I love you. On her way home, Judith's smartphone rang. When she opened the message, it was from Vanessa. Thomas and I are getting married. Next month. Of course, I want you to come too. Judith stared at her smartphone, and flashing back, the pain of the past returned. But this time was different. Now, she had new strength. As she replied to the message, she smiled genuinely for the first time. Congratulations. Of course I'll attend. I'll be bringing someone special too. October in Boston was colored with diverse autumn leaves, and the air was refreshing. Outside the historical luxury hotel, Charles River Inn near Harvard Square, an elegant sign read, Hamilton Montgomery Wedding. When Judith's sedan stopped in front of the hotel, a young valet parking attendant rushed over. Welcome, he bowed deeply. Thank you. Alex Griffin stepped out of the driver's seat and opened Judith's door. He was dressed in a deep blue Tom Ford suit, his appearance exuding elegance and confidence. Judith wore a deep green silk evening dress, with emerald necklace and earrings that accentuated her green eyes. Her golden hair was elegantly styled up, and her overall impression was one of refined beauty. As they entered the hotel arm in arm, several guests in the lobby turned to stare. Isn't that Judith Montgomery? Her former colleague Caroline approached. You look lovely. And. She shifted her gaze to Alex and lost her words. Alexander Griffin. Judith's partner, Alex smiled and extended his hand. Caroline's eyes widened. Of Griffin Technologies. Yes, that Griffin, Judith answered calmly. Caroline, how have you been? Still working under Thomas. Yes, but there have been many changes lately. She stumbled over her words. I had no idea you were connected to Griffin Technologies. Life is unpredictable, Judith said smoothly. Is the ceremony this way? The ballroom was luxuriously decorated, reflecting Vanessa's tastes. The white and gold-themed decorations gave an impression of elegance yet ostentation. As Judith and Alex entered, the surrounding conversations momentarily ceased, followed immediately by whispered gossip. Their seats were quite far from the main table. Seems they wanted to keep us at a distance, Judith laughed lightly. Perhaps their last resistance. Alex squeezed her hand. But distance doesn't matter. Today, you are the most beautiful woman. The ceremony began splendidly. Vanessa wore a pure white Vera Wang wedding dress, entering on the arm of her father Harold. Harold's face was filled with pride and joy. Thomas waited at the altar, and though his eyes watching the bride showed affection, there was also a calculating light mixed in. Judith quietly observed the ceremony. The once intense pain was now a dull memory, replaced by a new sense of happiness in her heart. She gently squeezed Alex's hand. He looked at her and returned an affectionate smile. At the reception, champagne was poured, and the orchestra played festive music. The food was first class, and the venue exuded luxury. When it came time for speeches, the master of ceremonies stood up with a microphone. And now, a word from the bride's father, Harold Montgomery. Harold stood before the microphone with dignity. Today, I am immensely pleased that my little princess, Vanessa, has united with a wonderful man, Thomas. He glanced momentarily at Judith's table but quickly returned his gaze. The Montgomery family cherishes the bond with the Hamilton family. Thomas is an excellent businessman, and I am deeply pleased to welcome him as a son. Amidst the applause, Thomas's father spoke next, followed by friends. Next, speeches from the bride and groom. Vanessa stood up and took the microphone. She looked at the guests with a dazzling smile. Everyone, thank you for gathering for us today, she said. I'm happy to share this special day with special people. But when a malicious light entered her eyes, Judith braced herself. Oh, Judith, my sister, also came. Vanessa suddenly pointed at Judith's table. Everyone, this is my loser sister, who lost to me. She laughed in a high-pitched voice. An uncomfortable silence spread through the venue. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, while others' eyes lit up with curiosity. Alex squeezed Judith's hand even tighter. Oh, just kidding, Vanessa waved her hand lightly. I want my sister to be happy. But since I've snagged Thomas, that might be difficult. She laughed again. Thomas took the microphone, saying, a word from me too. Today is the happiest day of my life. I'm truly fortunate to be united with a wonderful woman like Vanessa. He glanced at Judith. Choosing the sister really changed my life. I definitely chose the better one. His remarks caused uncomfortable whispers from some guests, especially Judith's former colleagues who frowned. However, Harold and those around him smiled. Judith slowly stood up. A gentle smile played on her face. May I borrow the microphone? She asked in a calm voice. The master of ceremonies showed a confused expression, but when Vanessa said challengingly, yes, of course. Is there a speech from my sister too? He reluctantly handed the microphone to Judith. I wish my sister and Thomas happiness, Judith said quietly. Tension ran through the venue. Life is a series of choices. We all make choices we believe are best for us. She gazed momentarily at Vanessa and Thomas. Their expressions showed relief that her sister had given up on revenge. So, I too have a celebratory speech, Judith continued. Let me introduce you, my new husband. She extended her hand to Alex. He stood up gracefully and stood beside her. This is my husband, Alexander Griffin. He is the CEO of the largest technology company group on the East Coast. Sounds of surprise spread through the venue. The smiles vanished from Thomas and Vanessa's faces, visibly paling. Actually, we got married quietly last week, she raised her left hand, where a subtle but beautiful diamond ring shone. We felt a grand ceremony wasn't necessary. Business and love sometimes flourish quietly. Alex put his arm around her waist and gently kissed her cheek. Applause naturally erupted from the audience. Vanessa's face contorted with anger and confusion, and Thomas coughed as if choking on food. And I have one more announcement, Judith continued. This week, Griffin Technologies has decided to acquire Boston Marketing Group. At these words, Thomas completely lost color and nearly collapsed in his chair. That was the company where he served as vice president. His colleagues couldn't hide their shock. Meanwhile, Harold showed a confused expression, his gaze shifting between his daughter and former son-in-law. Alex took the microphone. We are planning a major reorganization of the company. We intend to keep talented personnel, but unfortunately, those who disrupt teamwork. He paused meaningfully. However, today is not the place for such talk. Today is Thomas and Vanessa's special day. Congratulations. He raised his glass. Some guests were confused, not understanding what was happening, but the expressions of Judith's former colleagues were clearly changing. People who had once cold-shouldered Judith due to Thomas's influence or gossiped behind her back were beginning to understand the gravity of her position. Several, including Caroline, nodded slightly toward Judith's table. But don't worry. Today is your day, Judith concluded calmly. We'll discuss business matters on Monday at the office, Thomas. She and Alex returned to their seats. After a moment of silence in the venue, hushed conversations began among the guests. The music started playing again, and gradually the normal reception atmosphere returned. However, the expressions of the main couple remained clouded. By the time dessert was served, Judith headed to the restroom. By chance, she passed Harold in the hallway. He stared at her as if at a loss for words, and for the first time, genuine respect resided in his eyes. I seem to have underestimated you, he said quietly. Judith smiled. Do you finally understand who the winner is? She said softly. Harold could only nod silently. He searched for words, but nothing came. No words necessary, father, Judith placed her hand on his shoulder. Today is Vanessa's day. Please celebrate her. When she returned from the restroom, Alex was waiting for her. Are you all right? Better than before, she took his arm. Life sometimes has strange confluences. And sometimes gives perfect revenge, he smiled. Not revenge, Judith looked up at him. Justice. When Judith and Alex returned to their seats, the orchestra began playing a waltz. It was time for the bride and groom's first dance. Thomas and Vanessa proceeded to the center of the dance floor and began moving to the music, but their movements lacked the earlier splendor. Thomas's face showed clear anxiety, and Vanessa was forcing a smile. There are greetings from another table, Alex whispered in Judith's ear. Looking in that direction, she saw several of Thomas's company colleagues approaching their table. Judith, it's been a while, Michael Adams, a senior marketing director, took the initiative to speak. Since you left, the department's atmosphere has changed. Yes, I've heard, Judith responded calmly. About Griffin Technologies' acquisition. He paused once, as if choosing his words. What will happen to people like us? Judith took a sip from her glass and answered politely, we value talented personnel. Alex and I believe in fairly evaluating people's abilities and contributions. Everyone listened carefully to this exchange. Several other colleagues approached and joined the conversation, including a woman who had stolen Judith's ideas on Thomas's instructions and a man who had helped subtly exclude her from meetings. Now their expressions showed anxiety and regret. Everyone, don't worry, Alex smiled. Formal evaluations begin Monday, but we value not just past achievements but also future potential. His words contained both reassurance and warning. They nodded, expressed gratitude, and departed. When the dance ended, the microphone returned to the master of ceremonies, who encouraged the continuation of dinner and conversation. Thomas and Vanessa returned to the main table, but a heavy atmosphere hung around them. Harold frequently whispered something in his daughter's ear, and she nodded nervously. Judith, Alex took her hand. Shall we dance? They went to the dance floor. Alex led her, and they moved elegantly. The couples around them were beginning to understand who the real stars of the day were. Judith felt, at least for tonight, that all eyes were on them. As the music changed, Alex bowed and returned to his seat. Just as Judith was about to leave the dance floor, Thomas blocked her path. Just one dance, he said. In his voice was an attempt to recapture his once charming tone. Judith thought for a moment, then finally nodded. As they began to dance, Thomas spoke in a tense voice. Judith, I had no idea you were involved with Griffin Technologies. There's a lot you don't know, Thomas, she answered quietly. I'm important to the company. As vice president. Vice President, Judith repeated the words. Your position really does need reevaluation. Are you threatening me? His voice mixed with anger. No, just stating facts, she answered coolly. I know how much talent has been ignored and suppressed under you. Michael's e-commerce strategy, Sarah's social media initiatives, my network expansion plan. Thomas's face hardened. Judith, we're adults. Surely you won't bring past personal issues into business? Personal? She laughed softly. You took my work, damaged my reputation. That's a very business-related issue. The song was ending. What do you want? Thomas asked in a lowered voice. Fairness, she answered simply. A world where everyone is evaluated based on their abilities and contributions. The same standards will simply be applied to you. The music stopped, and they separated. Thomas's face showed confusion and fear. He tried to say something but couldn't find the words, awkwardly bowed, and left. When Judith returned to her seat, Alex offered her a glass of water. How was it? Refreshing, she answered. At that moment, Vanessa approached their table. Her expression mixed anger and fear. What are you planning to do? She said to her sister in a low voice. Are you satisfied with ruining our special day? I didn't ruin it, Judith answered quietly. From the moment you took the microphone, this day was tainted by you yourself. So it's revenge? Taking Thomas's job? He's a vice president. His position depends on his abilities, Judith said. If he's truly excellent, there's nothing to worry about. We're family. Vanessa said desperately. Something flickered in Judith's eyes, and she slowly stood up. Family? You took my husband and ruined my career. And today, you mocked me in front of everyone. This is what you call family. Vanessa was at a loss for words, her face flushing. But rest assured, Judith continued. I'm a better person than you. I didn't come for revenge. I just came to show the truth. What truth? The truth about real strength, what real success is, Judith answered. You and Thomas deserve each other. You're both people who can only rise by stepping on others. Vanessa was trembling with anger. I'll tell Dad. He still has influence. Perhaps it's time to show Father the truth too, Judith said. But today is your day. Enjoy it. Everything will change on Monday. Vanessa couldn't say anything and turned on her heel to leave. When she returned to the main table, she began talking intensely with Thomas. The blood drained from his face, and he was seen wiping sweat. At other tables, former colleagues who had once worked with Judith were conversing in small groups. Their gazes occasionally turned to Judith and Alex, and their expressions clearly showed changes in assessment. I can see people's attitudes changing, Judith said to Alex. When power dynamics change, people's behavior changes, he replied. But you're different. You've always been genuine. He took her hand and gently kissed it. Well, don't you think we've had enough? Let's leave this place and celebrate properly. Judith nodded. They elegantly stood up, exchanged minimal greetings, and left the venue. On their way to the exit, Judith's eyes met Harold's. In his eyes was a mixture of years of misunderstanding and new recognition. She nodded slightly and departed. Outside the hotel, the autumn night breeze caressed her cheeks. Judith took a deep breath. Freedom, she whispered. A new beginning, Alex put his arm around her shoulders. And on Monday. On Monday, business talk, she smiled. 3 months after the wedding, December Boston was covered in snow. At the Griffin Technologies headquarters, a meeting had just ended. Judith was reviewing the latest marketing department report while gazing at the snowy landscape from her spacious office window. There was a knock at the door, and Alex entered. Ready? It's time to go to your parents' house. Yes, Judith smiled. Just one final check. After the acquisition, Boston Marketing Group was completely reorganized. The evaluation system was renewed, and talented employees who had been suppressed for years were promoted to new positions. Thomas lost his vice president position and was demoted to a department head role. His dissatisfaction was obvious, but with Alex's warning, he had no choice but to accept it silently. Vanessa, too, was disturbed by her husband's diminishing influence. The luxurious life she had dreamed of was beginning to fade, and cracks were starting to appear in their relationship. Especially since she began checking messages on Thomas's cell phone and found signs that he was becoming intimate with a young female employee. Ironically, she seemed to have forgotten that she had betrayed her sister the same way. Judith and Alex got into the car and headed for the Montgomery family mansion. They were successful in business and had also built a warm home. Their new residence was a modern detached house built in Cambridge, a suburb of Boston. "Mom, don't forget to bring the Christmas presents," a message arrived on her phone from her mother Martha. The bond with her mother had grown stronger than before. Martha opened the front door. "Judith, Alex." She warmly embraced them both. "We've been waiting. Everyone else is here." In the living room, Harold sat on the sofa and stood up when Judith entered. His posture still retained its dignity, but there was also a softness to it. "My daughter," he said. "And my son," he nodded to Alex as well. Judith had made efforts to repair her relationship with her father over these 3 months. He, too, was trying to change, acknowledging years of prejudice and misunderstanding. "Thomas and Vanessa?" Judith asked. "They just called to say they'll be late," Martha answered. "Seems there's some emergency." Harold sat next to his daughter and said quietly, "For years, I held wrong values. I ask for your forgiveness." Judith took her father's hand. "Dad, let's make this not just simple forgiveness, but the beginning of a new relationship." At the Christmas dinner table, family conversation flowed pleasantly. Alex enthusiastically told Harold about new technology projects, and Martha asked Judith about her work. Thomas and Vanessa appeared when the meal was half over. The tension between them was evident. Upon entering, they sat in separate seats. As the night deepened, Judith felt the anger and resentment she once felt fading away. She now knew the true value of her life. When Alex took her hand, she felt warmth in the love and respect reflected in his eyes. As they were leaving, Harold called Judith aside. "You truly are a strong woman," he said. "You were right in front of my eyes all along, but I didn't notice." "I'm glad you notice now," she replied. As she got into the car, Judith looked back at the house. Vanessa and Thomas were arguing fiercely at the entrance. They were in the midst of learning the emptiness of material success. "Are you worried about them?" Alex asked. "No," Judith answered. "They made their choices. I have my own life." When they returned home, the fireplace fire welcomed them warmly. Alex poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to her. "Let's toast to the new year." "To the new year," she smiled. "And to true family." Looking at the snowy scene from the window, Judith reflected. True family is not just about blood ties but about respecting and supporting each other. She and Alex had found a form of true family based on love and respect. And her life was completed not by revenge, but by discovering her own value.